This session is the workplace social support networks and job satisfaction.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Peer Workforce Initiative Conference. We're thrilled to have you here. You are in the 9 a.m. session Pacific time for the presentation entitled Oxford House Model of Sober Recovery Housing. Dr. Ronald Harvey is the presenter, in which he will describe the Oxford House model of sober recovery housing, a completely self-run model of sober housing. The presentation will also describe some of the main research findings from Oxford House research in the United States and some of the initial findings trying to create Oxford houses in Bulgaria. My name is Lenny Westerfer. I'm with Share. If you have any questions or concerns, please send me a chat directly to me. And if you don't mind, if you're just joining us, we'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind putting your name, your organization, and your email into the chat. That way we can send you an evaluation at the end and track any of the PWI grantees. Now I'll turn it over to Dr. Harvey.
Thanks, Lenny. Just so you know, welcome everyone. I understand that you are all or mostly peer support workers. Working in different aspects of public service and mental health. I'm in Bulgaria and it is 7 p.m. So thank you for getting up at 9 a.m. This virtual conference is mostly being held in California. So I have a selection of some of my social psychology students physically in the classroom here, as well as online. And so everyone is invited to join and ask questions at any time. I'm from Chicago, USA, actually from Joliet, which is a suburb of Chicago. I got my PhD from DePaul University in 2014, so not very long ago. I've had a long career. This is career number 5 for me. There might be one more after this. But if there's one thing that I've learned in my life is that you can reinvent yourself. Most of my research is on Oxford House and recovery housing. So I will tell you some of the basics. Most of this presentation is about what Oxford House is and a little bit of its history and some of the main research findings. If we have time, we will talk about Oxford House research that I'm doing here in Bulgaria. So first, just a quick overview. I want to talk about one of the main problems in substance abuse treatment is relapse and what aftercare is designed to do to take care of that. Oxford House is one of these models for aftercare settings. Look at some of the research. And then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at any point. Lenny is going to monitor the chat. Lenny's going to monitor the chat, and if you have a question, you can type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. I can see a panel of people here on my screen, but Lenny is monitoring that as well, and you can ask it verbally. Okay, let's get started. So I have some figures. This is what I used in my main research to just show that sort of the need for aftercare for people with substance use disorders. I'm going to use a lot of acronyms to talk about alcohol and other drugs, AOD, substance use disorders, SUDs, and so on. In the United States, it's estimated right now that 27 million people have an SUD, a substance use disorder. And so Carolina, I think you're, even though it says you're muted, your mic is live, or sit through. There we go. So 27 people have an SUD in the United States. It's a lot. United States has about 330 million people. So about 9% of people have a substance use disorder. And then every year, only about 10% of those people seek treatment. So you have a lot of people with substance use disorders, but only 10% of people get treatment in the United States. Of those, 57% have been in treatment at least once prior to this. One of the things that is characteristic of lots of disorders, but particularly with substance use disorders, is that people need to go into treatment multiple times, right? And so other studies in the US says that between 40% and 70% of people who obtain treatment will relapse. Very, very high relapse. If you've ever smoked, there's the old Mark Twain thing, quitting smoking is easy. I've done it 100 times, right? And the same is true with substance. So there's a huge problem with substance use disorder relapse, right? There's a pattern of treatment, relapse, and subsequent retreatments. This has a huge effect, a huge taxing effect on the healthcare system, right? The same people tend to go through multiple times, taking up beds, taking up resources, and so on. It's a very tough problem to deal with. And so it's the problem of getting clean versus staying clean, right? This is what the Mark Twain quote is designed to sort of illustrate. It's easy to quit, but it's hard to stay stopped. And so some people call this a revolving door of substance abuse disorder treatment. There's a very popular video on YouTube that's out there called "Everything You Know About Addiction Is Wrong." And I like to talk about why everything you know about addiction is wrong is wrong. And this is the basic premise, is that addiction is about social disconnection. And whether or not that's a cause or an effect of addiction is the main premise of that video. The thing I try to get across to my students is addiction is a very complex phenomenon, right? It has genetic, specific, I'm getting a lot of noises here, so I'm not sure where that's coming from. It has genetic, specific chemicals, have specific addictive properties more than others. It has a biological component to it, and of course, psychological components to it. Very often, people use drugs and alcohol because of trauma, because of untreated psychological disorders, sexual abuse, domestic abuse, and so on. It involves the family system, it involves the larger social system that people grow up in, and it also is a learned behavior. You learn to do things from parents and peers, from other associates. It also involves the criminal justice system. About 20% of the people in the United States are in prison because of drug offenses. And so it's also very highly stigmatized. One of the interesting things about my work being from the United States and working elsewhere is that the levels of stigmatization vary dramatically in different parts of the world. And that's been an amazingly valuable thing for me to learn. Addiction takes time to develop and also takes time for remission to take hold. John Kelly is a very noted addictions researcher. I borrowed this slide from him from an Oxford House convention. And so between the time of an addiction onset to help seeking is anywhere between 4 or 5 years. So people use during this time and then start to seek help. Sometimes it takes multiple times, 4 to 5 treatment episodes and mutual help attempts of 8 years before people become to fully stop using drugs or alcohol. To get to 1 year abstinent, it's about 12 years. And then the risk of relapse drops below 50% after people have been entirely clean for 5 years. That's what the general research says. And so he talks about this as recovery priming, this idea that you're aware of a problem and that it needs addressing, and that the treatment episodes take multiple attempts. And then the continuing care and mutual help is something that is ongoing for the rest of a person's life. And so most in my field that I'm looking at, addiction is a chronic condition. It requires maintenance and care through the life after a person develops this condition. And so I like to think of substance abuse treatment as encompassing 3 very, very broad areas. Prevention. My students here probably are familiar with their high school programs where somebody comes in and basically says, don't do drugs, right? So that's a type of a prevention program, but there's also screening, harm reduction to prevent serious things from happening. Then we get to treatment. The middle one, this is after somebody has developed problems and they go, usually they get primary treatment, detoxification, hospitalization, sometimes therapeutic communities, and then aftercare, which includes mutual support groups, peer support groups, recovery housing, and so on. This is the area that I study most of all. Aftercare is the attempt to prevent relapse after treatment. All these other areas have their own sort of disciplines and different problems associated with that. And so again, why do we need aftercare? The problem is that individual focused treatment is very often ineffective because we looked at some of the factors. It's a social phenomenon. It involves families, it involves neighborhoods and environments and so on. Here's the main thing. Even with the best individualized treatment, you have to leave at some point. And generally you go back very often to non-supportive environments. You see this over and over and over again. Friends or family might be still using alcohol and other drugs. People might go back to drug dealing neighborhoods where there's high crime. There's lack of safe, affordable housing, lack of job opportunities, and of course, the stigmatization, right? People don't want to tell what's going on. And so the main thing that's important for aftercare is sober social support. It's essential if you want to promote health behaviors. Having people around you that want you to succeed increases your chance of succeeding. So this is why I focus on aftercare. So aftercare options, there's a number of them. I'm going to focus on basically two of them. Many people go to mutual help groups. Alcoholics Anonymous is the most famous of them, but there's lots and lots of other ones, Narcotics Anonymous, and then specific, there's rational recovery and so on. The advantage is that it's cheap. It's inexpensive. In the United States, it's almost everywhere. It's ubiquitous. There's AA groups in almost every town in the United States. You get peer support. Mutual help groups are usually staffed exclusively by people with the same problems that you have. And so I talk from experience. The bad thing is that there's limited availability of meeting length, right? It's typically 1 hour. And it's the same problem. You might get peer support for that 1 hour. It's very individualized, and then you go back out into the world, right? And so you might return to an unsupportive social setting, or you just don't have a safe place to live, you have no job, and so on. AA is not designed to give employment. Another aftercare option are therapeutic communities. TC has a lot of advantages. You can stay a longer length of time. It's not unlimited, but it's a safe place to live, right? You have paid professionals with training who are given tools to pass on to teach people on how to stay clean. However, clients have little say in the operations. Sometimes it's difficult to replicate. There are certainly, you have Betty Ford, Hazelden, that has been reproduced in multiple parts of the world, but it's difficult sometimes to reproduce a specific therapeutic community. It's expensive. There are some places that cost, $30,000 a month. These are the Malibu treatment centers. And again, you have to leave at some point. You can't live there forever. You might have to go back to unsupportive social settings. And so this is where Oxford houses come in. So Oxford houses, I took this is a direct quote from the manual. In its simplest form, an Oxford house is a democratically run, self-supporting, and drug-free home. This is a bit of an exaggeration. I've been studying Oxford houses for a long time, and I use this term not quite flippantly, but I mean most of it. They're almost breathtaking in their simplicity, as opposed to their complexity. Oxford houses were founded in 1975 in Silver Spring, Maryland, by a small group of recovering addicts. These people were living in a therapeutic community, a halfway house that had lost its funding, and they were going to be evicted. And they knew they were going to be evicted. And these founders had been in treatment multiple times, and they knew they were in big trouble because they felt that they had reached the end of their rope. This was kind of their last stint in treatment. And so they decided to rent a house on their own. Partially because they had no place to go, but they were friends and they decided to do this. And so being in treatment multiple times, they kind of knew what they liked. They kind of knew what they didn't like about the places they had been in. And so the first rule, the first principle that they found was that no professionals. We hate doctors. We hate people telling us what to do, these experts, right? And so this was going to be a self-run community. The second thing that they decided was that it was going to be have democratic governance. We make our own rules within the Oxford House. And so the therapeutic communities that they lived in had curfews, times when dinner would be served, what you ate. And so they said, no, we're going to make our own rules. And then the last thing was that there was going to be no maximum length of stay. There was always this thing hanging over their heads that they had to move out at some point.
Dr. Harvey, there is a question about the cost of the the room, because sober livings can be very expensive, and
Yep.
so they're wondering about that part of the equation.
Yep, I'll get there as part of our research. But
Thank you.
Because it's ordinary rental housing, it is the rent of a house divided by how many people live there. And typically it's anywhere between $80 to $130 per month or per week. So, but I'll get into that more, the nuts and bolts, when we get into our evaluation. So the model is after renting this house, this group of founders surprised themselves after 6 months that they were all sober. They're all still living together. And they said, what the hell is what's going on? And another group of friends from another halfway house said, hey, show us what you guys did and we're going to rent a house. So this other group rented a house. And together they sort of formulated the basics of what became an Oxford house. And so the model is this. First, is really only three parts of the Oxford House model. It's an abstinence model, but it's a tough love abstinence model. If you're found using drugs or alcohol even once, the resident living there must leave immediately. And by immediately, it's not like in a week after you figure out what you're doing. It's immediately. All residents must contribute equally to house finances, the maintenance of the house, the chores, and the administration. And the way they do that is there's a revolving set of leadership, a president, a treasurer, a comptroller, a secretary, but they all rotate through these positions. There are chores, usually written on a whiteboard within a house. Somebody's in charge of cleaning the toilets for this week. Somebody's in charge of doing the shopping. Someone's in charge of this, but it's all shared within the house. All house-wide decisions must be made democratically, including who gets to live there and who has to leave. If these conditions are met by the individual living there, you can live there as long as you want. The longest I've heard of anyone living in an Oxford house is 14 years. And I asked that person, why do you live here 14 years? He says, this is my family. People come in and out, but this is my home. This is where I live. And so the overriding principle for all Oxford houses is to maintain stability within the house. This is why they do not tolerate anyone using at any time, because that threatens the stability of the house. This is why you must participate in the democratic governance, because it threatens the stability of the House. This is why you must participate in the finances. If you're paying and you're not, that threatens the stability of the House, right? And so it's one of the main characteristics, and it's important to keep that in mind about the stability. The Oxford House name was chosen. It was named after a religious group that was the precursor to Alcoholics Anonymous, called the Oxford Group. It has nothing to do with Oxford University. In fact, it's not a religious organization. Oxford House is not a religious organization. It's just the name that they chose. The vast majority of Oxford houses in the United States, in fact, I'm sorry, in the world, are single-family homes with a minimum of 6 same-sex residents. Typically, bedrooms are shared either by bunk beds or 2 separate beds. The largest Oxford house I've heard of has 18 residents. It's a 9-bedroom house. Not unusual on the high end, but not unusual in the United States. But the optimal size seems to be 8 to 12 members living in a house. This slide, I'm going to go back to this slide. These pictures on the bottom are of actual Oxford houses. I took these from the Oxford House homepage. So this is, you can't see that here, but my students here are kind of going, whoa, those are nice houses. Because in Bulgaria, houses like this don't exist, right? Almost everybody here lives in flats, apartment buildings with 2 or 3 rooms, right? But that has a big impact on trying to create Oxford houses here. So Oxford houses, you can view them as sort of this hybrid between a mutual help group and a therapeutic community. So like a mutual help group, it's peer support, peer run, no professional affiliation, and it's not treatment. It is social support, in this case for abstinence. Social support for abstinence. But unlike a mutual help group, it's almost 24/7, right? It's a continuous support. It is the place you live, and you go to get the support all the time. Like a therapeutic community, you can live there. It has living conditions, and just like a TC, the therapeutic milieu that you live in is the therapeutic treatment, right? Being around people that want you to succeed is part of this, right? It's a safe and stable place to live, but unlike a TC, it has no maximum length of stay and no authority figures. Even if you have a peer administrator in a TC, they can kick you out. They have influence over you. In Oxford House, they try to get rid of that completely, as much as possible. So there's the National Association of Recovery Residences. It is trying to set up standards throughout the United States for different levels of sober housing. Oxford houses are this level 1, peer run, democratically run, has screening house meetings, has self-help meetings encouraged, generally single family residences and so on. As you move up this, it gets more official, it gets more commercial, and it becomes more complicated. Because Oxford houses are ordinary housing and there's no treatment there, there's no licenses. Because there's no professionals administering anything in it, you don't need a license. It's just a house that you rent. Literally, you go and rent the house and you move stuff in there, you move furniture in there, and people go in there to live. And so it's a very simple and easily replicated model, at least in the United States, not so much here in Bulgaria. And I'm not saying these other types of recovery residences are invalid. Depending on the, I'm a recovery and aftercare pluralist. I think different people need different sets of structures in order to thrive and to do well. Not everybody is ready for a peer run, self-run model. And so all these other models are completely valid. I'm just saying this is where Oxford houses sit. Oxford houses are very heavily influenced by the Alcoholics Anonymous model, both in terms of organization. They have a literature and traditions. If you're familiar with AA, they have the same things as well. There's a central administration called Oxford House World Services, not coincidentally, similar to Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, Inc. Individual Oxford houses can apply to be what's called an officially chartered Oxford house or not. Each individual Oxford house is completely self-run. They can choose unique things for themselves, unique rules for themselves. But generally, a lot of them apply for Oxford House Charter. On the Oxford House website, they have published a lot of documentation, suggested best practices. There's a manual on how to start an Oxford House. There's spreadsheets on how to figure out whether or not its cost is viable. There are forms to fill out, applications for for admitting new residences. They're all freely available at www.oxfordhouse.org. One thing that really influenced the creation of Oxford houses in 1988, during the Reagan administration, Congress passed what was called the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, which included this provision to give states money. I think about at the time it was $100,000 they could use to loan individuals who wanted to create recovery homes. Some based on the Oxford House model, but based to move things out of the institutional area back into the community. And so these loans are $4,000. I think today some states have a little bit higher loans of $6,000, some a little bit lower. But the idea is that you give a loan to pay for the first month's rent, to buy furniture, security deposit, get things moving, and to foster the creation of these recovery homes. And then these are paid back by the first residents in the first 24 months. Most states report very, very, very high success rates and creation rates and payback rates from these loans. And because of that, you have this huge growth of Oxford houses. After 46 years, there are 3,000 Oxford houses with 25,000 beds in 49 states in the United States. Which state doesn't have Oxford houses? I think it's California, because you have your own recovery home system, I believe. But it's very successful. When I finished my research, this number was 2,000 Oxford houses. So it's grown a lot. In the United States, there are 950 homes for women with 7,500 beds. Number of houses for men is 2,100. This reflects about the addiction rates between men and women in the United States. It's about 70-30. And there's about 150 to 200 new homes are created per year in the United States. So it grows, it's growing a lot. This I took directly from the Oxford House webpage. This is the resident profile that they gather every single year. The average age of residents is 38. Average educational level. You can look at average jail time that for Oxford House residents is about 8 months. Percent going to counseling plus AA or NA is 38%. Average length of sobriety is a little over a year. Average length of stay in an Oxford house is about 9.5 months. This has remained very stable over the past year. This is a very interesting one. Prior homelessness, almost 3/4, 71% were homeless prior to living in an Oxford house, and who had been in jail prior, almost 85%. I think there might be a cost. Average earnings is $1,600 a year. Average rent per group per month is about $2,000. So that answers your question. You divide that $2,000 by the number of residents. That's how much it costs. So, I mean, these are available on the Oxford House website, but I just give you an idea of the breakdown here. There are specialized Oxford houses for Spanish speaking, now Polish speaking in the United States, for the hearing impaired. Most of the women's houses allow children to live there, children up to 16 years of age to live with the parent. And a good number of men's houses also allow children. People living with HIV, transgendered people, veterans from specific conflicts, people on medically assisted treatment, people with comorbid disorders, schizophrenia, et cetera, et cetera. And again, they're self-run. When people apply to live in an Oxford house, and you have to apply to live there, you're told what kind of house it's going to be. The Oxford House website, www.oxfordhouse.org, has so much material. You can spend a lot of time learning about it and doing that. But I wanted to point this one out to you. This is a link, by the way, above Google, that's Bulgaria. Is vacancies. And this is a really, really great service that you can do. You can just type in a zip code where you're going to be, and it will list the Oxford houses that are available there. And you can click on the contacts for that particular house, shows you a picture of the house, shows you a picture of the room, and the main contact, whether or not it allows children, et cetera, et cetera.
Dr. Harvey, there is a question about starting new houses. It says, if these are democratically run, how are decisions made about getting started? Because it seems like a group must have come together first. And an additional question is the difficulty in renting, since typically we need 3 times the rent for income, credit score, that kind of thing to get started.
Yep. So I mentioned before about this revolving loan program. So most states have decided to hire what are called recruiters to administer the revolving loan program. And their job is to basically create these yearly 150 to 200 homes distributed through the United States. And literally what these recruiters do is they go through the paper and look for rental properties. They scope out the rental property. They look and see if it's large enough, number of bedrooms, and they decide on behalf of the state, and if it's going to be an Oxford house, on behalf of Oxford House, to rent this house using the revolving loan funds. They sign the initial lease in Oxford House. They pay the money, but as they're preparing all these things, they put up signs or go through the network to find out at like Alcoholics Anonymous meetings or treatment centers, housing available. This neighborhood, this is how much it costs. Contact this initial recruiter. And that initial recruiter does what the name implies. They recruit the initial residents. If the recruiter thinks that that resident is serious about staying clean and is a good candidate for living in an Oxford house, they become a resident and they start to become part of the democratic process to screen and talk to other potential residents. I will tell you, starting the Oxford house is a big job. It requires a lot of care and feeding, but the funds are from the revolving loan program, and we have full-time staff. Most states have full-time staff whose only job is to create Oxford houses and to get initial residents, and then to make sure that they're stable over the initial period of time. Initially, Oxford houses are very unstable. And it takes usually several months of people learning the ropes before they become stabilized. Sometimes it takes as long as 6 months, but after that time, they tend to become self-running entities, and the recruiter can move on to others. It's sort of like spinning plates. If you've seen the circus acts where they're spinning multiple plates, some are very wobbly, some are very stable. And I think depending on the budget for the state, they'll have anywhere from 10 to 12 recruiters working full-time all over the state to create Oxford houses.
So Dr. Harvey, a question is, so are the recruiters Oxford House employees?
No, they are state employees, but they're usually Oxford House alumni. people who have lived in Oxford House or do live in Oxford House and know the system kind of inside and out, but they are state employees.
Thank you.
And since, I mean, Oxford House is a not-for-profit, just like AA is a not-for-profit, nobody's getting rich. That's kind of the other sort of a weird, twisty thing, because nobody's making money off this other than the landlords, right? The people who own the property. And by the way, we've done studies of landlords. They love renting their houses to Oxford House residents because generally, and we've done studies on this, Oxford House residents make good neighbors, because one of the big things, is you're well aware of, this is NIMBY, not in my backyard. Oxford House residents know that they need to be good neighbors. And so they tend to take very good care of their house. They tend to take very good care of their neighborhoods. There's also no drinking and partying going on, hopefully, right? And so neighbors like that. And our studies interestingly find that the closer you live to an Oxford House, the more positive your view is of recovery housing in general. And the farther you live away from it, the more negative you feel about it. I have a question in my classroom. Yes.
Is it necessary for the property to be rented, or it can be owned?
The property has to be rented. And the reason is who owns it? If you live in the house and you're the owner, that changes the whole power dynamic, right? And so rental housing tends to keep that issue out.
Dr. Harvey, do you know in California which department someone would look to find a recruiter?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I don't think, I mentioned that Oxford House exists in 49 states. I don't think they exist in California. You could easily find out, go to the Oxford House website and type in a California zip code and just see if any of them exist there. I'm not super familiar, because I've lived in Bulgaria for so long. I'm not super familiar with how the Oxford House organization is distributed in the United States. But I had, for some reason, thought that California is kind of on its own system. And so there might be something similar to creating recovery housing. It's just not it's not based on the Oxford House model.
One other question that just came in: how do they get around eviction laws when expelling people, and how do they confirm or deny substance abuse without testing?
Oh, they do test. So some houses keep drop kits on hand. If you read the Oxford House literature, basically, because everyone is living very closely together, and it's very difficult to hide use when people are living so close together. And if somebody suspects somebody is using, they can call a house meeting, and everyone's required to come to the house meeting. And it might be a little confrontational. It could be much more compassionate based, but because everyone lives so close together, people know what's going on within the house. And so they can ask for a drop. And if the person refuses a drop, the rest of the house members can take a vote on whether or not to retain the house member.
Carolina just put in the chat the information for the California Department of Healthcare Services, FYI, and also a link to the Oxford House history. So if you're interested in looking up more about that in California, there's information in the chat.
Great, thank you so much. So now we're going to get into the research on the effectiveness of Oxford House. By the way, thank you for these questions. These are great questions. Oxford House is listed as a best practice and SAMHSA's National Registry site. And so it's gotten the endorsement. It used to be the only one, the only recovery model, housing recovery model that had that. I'm not sure if that's still true, so I took that out. Here's the thing to keep in mind, and this has guided my research for a long time. I think there are 6 critical structural ingredients to create an Oxford House anywhere in the world. The first is house. You need a house. You need some sort of communal space because you need shared interactions It needs to be a safe place. It needs to be accessible, comfortable, and affordable. We have a lot of that in the United States. Turns out that doesn't exist hardly anywhere else in the world. Number two, you need residents, people in recovery willing to live together and to abide by the rules of self-governance. Again, that doesn't exist everywhere in the world. People, because it's self-supporting, people need income. They need to get jobs. And by the way, we have laws in the United States that support all these things. The Fair Housing Act, about housing. The Jobs Act that prevents discrimination. Again, that doesn't exist in most places in the world, right? You can discriminate in most places in the world because of those things. Number four, you need institutional support. Basically, the government is not going to shut you down. Cooperation or at least non-interference from government, treatment professionals, and so on. You need community support, what I call, the villagers with the pitchforks storming the castle. We got fireworks happening here, so apologize for the noise. It's not for my benefit, by the way. But community support, acceptance of families, 12-step meetings, and of course, not in my backyard. And then you need leadership. This has never happened before here on campus. It's the first week. It's the first week of our campus starting here, so that could be what's happening. But you need leadership, people willing to put in the work, to start care and feeding of these first initial Oxford houses, monitor them, and to keep them stabilized. Keep those 6 ingredients in mind. We take in the United States, this was the life-changing thing for me. I had done research on Oxford houses. I sort of knew how they worked very well in the United States. I sort of mentally picked it up and put it in Bulgaria. And I thought, shit, there's no houses that you can rent here. We're in big trouble. Residents, it's still highly stigmatized. Recovery is highly stigmatized here. Oh, everyone can discriminate against everybody getting jobs. You can ask somebody in a job interview, are you an addict? Are you a former addict? Get out of here. And it's totally okay. And so all these things sort of became part of my framework here. Anyway, since the 90s, mostly through my advisor, Lenny Jason, we've had well over 200, probably we're close to 300 now, peer-reviewed papers on Oxford House from DePaul, right? This has been done usually with a community psychology or clinical community psychology focus, which means we try to do as much as possible participatory action research. We worked very, very, very closely with the Oxford House community over the years to do some of the first evaluations and to continue to do this research. And so here's the payoff. One of the early studies on Oxford Houses, which was a 2-year study. We had 100 participants randomly assigned to Oxford House or usual care. We followed them for 2 years. And this is the first random assignment of Oxford House study. And usual treatment, people could go to 12-step groups, outpatient programs and so on. And the result was that Oxford House residents, after 2 years, 87% maintained sobriety versus 45%. So 87% is only almost 90%. My advisor at the time said, if you had a drug that worked 45% of the time, and then you have this drug B that worked 90% of the time, people would be clamoring for this, right? But because it's self-help, peer support, nobody's making money off this, it doesn't quite have the same impact. We found our costs anywhere between $80 and $110 per week. This is in 2007. The societal costs per individual in an Oxford House range from $571 to $3,000. The high-end costs had to do more with startup costs per individual. Inpatient care ranged from almost $4,000 to almost $17,000. And of course, incarceration compared to prison between $20,000 and $40,000. So being in an Oxford House saved a lot of money. We found the average length of stay in Oxford House in 2007 to be about 9 months. And here's the really important thing that we found. Dosage is the key. You have to stay in an Oxford House at least 6 months for it to have any difference compared to any other treatment modality. So prior to 6 months, no difference between Oxford Houses and anything else. After 6 months, sobriety rates went way up. So the big question is, what happens at 6 months? We found it's making a friend. Being in close relationships with other people and caring about somebody who's in the same situation you are has a very, very, very powerful effect. We found that making a friend in an Oxford House, so even prior to 6 months, but making a friend in an Oxford House was the strongest predictor that they were going to be sober at 6 months and afterwards. And that was pretty amazing. And again, sort of breathtaking in its simplicity, right? I did some Oxford House research on some of these critical ingredients. Why do Oxford Houses stay open and why do they close? We looked at 214 Oxford Houses and examined why they closed over a 6-year period. And we found that the sustainability rate is very, very high, almost 87%. 186 Oxford Houses remained open and 28 closed. Why did the 28 close? 14 was because of lack of affordable housing. The rents went up. The rent is too damn high party went on this. And then only 13 of those were because people were unable to adhere to the Oxford House rules because of houses were unstable or they couldn't find employment. We didn't find any house level differences in sense of community, length of stay, et cetera, et cetera. Oxford House research with ex-offenders. We had 270 ex-offenders were assigned to 3 conditions, either an Oxford House, therapeutic community, or usual care. They could go and do whatever they wanted. And we followed them over the course of 2 years. A very, very interesting study. We found that people stayed in either an Oxford House or a therapeutic community. They tended to have better employment outcomes and reduced alcohol and drug use. The Oxford House condition had more sober days overall. They had better sobriety rates. They had more income. They had more job opportunities. And then now we're starting to look at sort of the things that make Oxford Houses work a little bit differently than other conditions. I did this study on social climate. You students here, if you take research methods, you're going to learn a lot about social climate in the fall. I compared the social climate of Oxford Houses, 70 individuals and 62 people were living in a therapeutic community. And Oxford House residents found that they were more involved, that they had greater support, that it was more practical. They learned more practical skills living in an Oxford House, that they were able to be more spontaneous and more autonomous, and that it was more order and organization than the TC residents. And then most interestingly, women found that the Oxford House was better with dealing with personal problems and in order and organization compared to men who lived in the Oxford House. So the last thing I'll leave you with is what we think is actually going on inside an Oxford House. There's a researcher from the VA who's done addiction research, Rudy Moose, and Bernadette Moose have been doing research for quite a long time. They think that there are 4 psychological processes going on in Oxford House. Social learning, which we'll talk about in social psychology a lot. You just learn role modeling from others. Something called social control. When you choose who you live with, this is the great thing about Oxford House. If you don't like who you're living with, it's kind of because you picked them, right? You choose who you live with, right? And so this tends to make people more bonded to their settings. Something called behavioral economics, which is people do the cost benefit of living in a safe, supportive environment versus the alternatives. And then some stress and coping. Being around people who are dealing with the same things you are relieves stress. Early recovery in general is very, very, very stressful. leaving prison and going back into the world is very, very stressful. Being around people who understand what's going on with you tends to relieve stress. And so part of the reason Oxford houses work is they're small. You put 100 people in a therapeutic community, these same processes don't have the chance to work, right? And so an Oxford house, minimum of 6, maximum of about 12, you really get to know people. And because you can live there as long as you want, you really do get to know people much better, right? And so communal living fosters social learning, having democratic say in what goes on and the rules that you live in gives you additional social control. There are clear consequences if you use in an Oxford house. Everyone knows this. You sign a contract when you come in. By the way, I don't think I addressed the question earlier about landlords and eviction. You sign a contract that says that you agree to these conditions and that if you violate them, you must leave immediately. And so I believe that is how they get around the eviction laws from landlords in the United States. And then stress and coping, you learn from peers to identify and deal with problems. So here's the big question. Are we having an impact? This is, again, research from John Kelly. They found in a study just recently published that 9.1% or 22 million Americans have resolved an alcohol or drug problem. So people do recover in the world. And again, this is very, very impactful. What you believe is possible helps determine to a large degree what is possible. I live and work in a world where people, I'll never forget, I was with a taxi driver and I told him that I work with people, a taxi driver here in Bulgaria. I told this person, he asked me, he spoke English. He said, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I work with people recovering from drug addiction. And he said, oh, those people should just be shot. And as a community psychologist, I was trained to ask the next question because everyone exists in a context. I asked them, why do you think that? And this person said to me, because nobody recovers from addiction here, nobody. And after a conversation, I learned that this person had never witnessed anybody recovering from addiction. I said, you know, George W. Bush was president of the United States. He was an admitted alcohol and cocaine addict. He goes, yeah, that's the United States. That can't happen here. And so to a very large degree, what you believe is possible determines what you're going to try to do. And that's guided my research a lot here. That's my, I don't want to take any more of your time. I could tell you very briefly about stuff happening in Bulgaria, but I'm happy to take your questions about Oxford House now.
People are welcome to raise their hands from the participants tab. Or you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
By the way, that taxi driver was probably the most important person I ever spoke to because I never thought about treatment the same again. And just let me describe to you recovery and addiction and treatment and the possibility for getting well in the United States is imbued in our culture. I mentioned George W. Bush, sports figures, actors, politicians. We know the sobriety status of a lot of people. They've come out and they're public about it and so on and so forth. We mourn when people relapse and we cheer them when they succeed, right? That culture doesn't exist hardly anywhere in the world. And we don't know that. We take that for granted. And so we think addiction is very highly stigmatized in the United States. It's highly, it's not talked about in most other places. We talk about everything. Yeah, William, go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for the presentation and for coming all the way from Bulgaria. This is kind of a long-winded way to get to a question, but I wasn't the least bit surprised when you said that we don't have this model in California. And You know, I can almost see why. We had a local program that ran very similarly to this. And long story short, what happened is somebody who lived in one of those houses went out and got high on heroin. And then he came back and detoxed and died in the house. And they got sued out of existence because they were, you know, determined to be doing something that was out of the scope of their ability to do. And then, you know, we also have a lot of for-profit providers in this state who are following this model in a very minimal way. They set up what are called sober living houses or sober living environments, SLEs or SLHs, and they charge people for rooms, but you know, it kind of follows the model. There's somebody there on site who is getting their room for free to oversee the house, but there's no program or anything. They just send people out to 12-step meetings because, as you said earlier, they're free, you know, and that's the only thing that's there for a program. And they end up kind of turning into a revolving door. But I think that they might be creating competition for this model, and that, you know, these for-profits would be out there getting the available houses and the available resources that might have otherwise been able to be used by a nonprofit. So I just say all that to ask this, any suggestions about how in a particularly greedy and litigious state we might be able to make something like this happen?
Well, what I would recommend is, well, change the laws, right? You know, you have to, there's a great quote that is also a guiding factor for me. If you really want to understand something, try to change it, right? And you try and change it, you'll see all the people who have a vested interest, all the power structures and so on and so forth. It may not be possible in California to change that. If you were to do it, I would just start a house, do it under the radar. There's nothing stopping you from renting a house, unless you have laws that says, and I think you know, all the way up to the Supreme Court, you can't pass a law that says 5 or more unrelated people can't live in the same house together. But I don't think you would be able to call it an Oxford House, because I think Oxford House has washed their hands of trying to establish officially in certain places. Oxford Houses they do exist in Canada, Australia, I think in New Zealand. They exist in indigenous areas in the United States as well as Canada, but they are much more autonomous in those areas than they are in off reservation, but they still exist, right? And they use some more traditional methods within the Oxford House to do so, but it may not be possible, you know, to do that in California. You could probably approach it, and there's some really good researchers in California who studies sober living homes, who probably would be a good person to talk to about this. Doug Polson is one of those people. Amy Merkel works with Doug. I think they would be good people to try and contact about moving towards that sort of Oxford House model. Good luck.
Thank you.
I will tell you, here in Bulgaria, there's no laws against starting Oxford Houses, so we just did it, right? And I have gotten buy-in from the National Center for Addictions here. They love this idea. Why? Because it didn't cost them anything. And some wacky American is coming in and doing it. So, you know, we've had very limited success. In fact, Oxford Houses had limited success outside of the United States. As far as I know, there are 2 Oxford Houses in Great Britain. There's 1 in Sweden. We have 1 here in Bulgaria, and that's it. There's 1 in Ghana, but I wouldn't even call it an Oxford House because it's a very different model.
Well, that's all the time we have for this presentation, but thank you so much, Dr. Harvey. It's been wonderful listening to you. And I want to let everyone know that this has been recorded. Recording will be made available. And we're also going to ask Dr. Harvey to please send us these slides so we can provide that alongside with the recording. So you can have access to this. Can we give him a Zoom. Hala. Thank you very much, Dr. Harvey. It was wonderful. This room will stay open all day. The next presentation is about making Alcoholics Anonymous easier by Dr. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Kaskutas. I'll get the proper pronunciation in a minute. So you are welcome to stay in this room. You're welcome to consult the schedule, which I will be putting up, and Zoom into whichever talk you'd like to hear. Thanks very much for putting your name, your organization, and your email in the chat so that we can track your attendance and also send you an evaluation. And you can direct message me if you have any questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Harvey. It was wonderful listening to you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your questions and your attention. Bye-bye. Division.
Let me see if it's me.
Does anybody want
Okay, Dr. Lee, please tell me how to pronounce your last name.
You did it fine. It's Cascudas.
It's Cascudas. What a great name. I am
Thanks.
going to make
Thank
you a
all.
co-host. I will also make, is Tony here? Let me see. I don't see Tony unless, I don't see Tony yet, but when he arrives, I'll make him a co-host.
Thank you.
Of course.
How's
And
my video? Should I turn my volume up?
your volume sounds wonderful. And yeah, I don't know if it's possible to pivot so we don't see the window. That would just be a little, overly specific on the video background. But I think that I like the backdrop of the tapestry.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Can you see Misty?
No, you got to tilt your camera down just a hair. Oh my goodness. Hello, Misty.
Say hi, Auntie.
Oh,
She's my support animal.
wonderful.
I'll put her down, but right now she calls
Okay.
me.
Yes, we can see your screen.
I know I got permission to bring mine in to share, but I figured I wouldn't have much time to take him out today, so bring him in another time. Great that you have Misty. Would you like to take, so I guess you've talked with Tony about how you'd like to facilitate the questions and answers and stuff?
A little bit. I sent him an email that gave
Okay.
him the gist of my concerns, and I think I maybe copied you on it.
Let me double check.
Oh, no, I probably didn't. I don't really know that I did. I copied you on the one with my slides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, would you like to tell me how you like to
Yeah,
handle it? Okay.
My talk is about an intervention we developed called Making Alcoholics Anonymous Easier. And I developed it for people in recovery to use in treatment and recovery settings.
Okay.
And I didn't design it for professional doctors or addiction professionals. It was for people in recovery to deliver in programs that were 12-step oriented or that wanted to use AA or NA. And some of the reactions that I've gotten from the treatment programs where I have talked about the intervention and also where I tested it in a clinical trial was, well, we're in recovery. Why do we need an intervention that tells us how to introduce people to AA? We know how to do that. We do that as sponsors. We do that as counselors already. We have lots of 12-step programs in the treatment program. Why would we need this manual? And who are you anyway to develop it? And so I want to make room in the discussion of questions you and Tony feed me for that controversy.
Okay.
Because it's real and valid. And so that's one thing I wanted to, and it may not come up. It depends on the audience and their mood and their history.
I just got word that Tony is on his way. He was in a different room. So
Okay.
he's making his way to the Serenity Room, and I was slightly distracted while you were telling me that, trying to get him here. So I hope that I understand what you were saying. But we'll, I have confidence all will be well. So for all of you who are joining us, we have 25 participants so far, and we're asking that everyone put their name, organization, and email in the chat if you haven't done so already, just so we can send you an evaluation later in the day. And for those of you who are part of the Peer Workforce Initiative project, it's very important for the grant that we be able to track your attendance. And so we're using the chat function in order to do that today. Let me see where Tony is. I can also email him the direct link. Need be. Oh, okay. So he was sent a link. So hopefully he'll find us soon. Well, we still have about 4 minutes.
Lenny,
Yeah.
I would like to, if possible, for you to give me an announcement of some sort when I'm like 15 minutes towards my stop time.
Sure.
And depending on where I am in the talk, I'll either have already gotten there before you say it, and then you won't have to say it, which would be to give us some breakout rooms for people to go to,
Okay.
talk about how they might use Maze and what their reactions are to it. And if I run out of time to do that, because I'm not far along up in my slides, maybe I don't know whether the fellowship room would be a place where I could talk to people about it or not. Oops. Oh, there you are.
There
Hi.
I am. Hi, sorry.
And there I am.
There you are.
Misty Lou, where are you? See, we'll have him show you instead of me. No, I'm just kidding.
Try to get Tony here.
Lee,
Hi, Susan.
I just want you to know I'm here. I'm taking notes. You and
Oh,
Tony.
get out. Oh, my goodness. Well, my slides and the talking points,
I can't
Did I-
wait. I can't wait.
the slides and the talking points are going to be on the share website, and I can also send them to you. So you don't need to take too many notes. But here's Misty Lou.
Oh, look, love her. Oh, she looks so cute. She's got a coat on.
Yeah, it's a little chilly here. The canyon that I live across from is full of fog, and I'm looking right out at the fog. It's very beautiful, but a little chilly willy. You look good. I'm
You
upset
look
with you,
good.
though, that you did not put in a presentation for your vocabulary stuff. It
I
would-
will. I will. I just wanted to experience the experience. So, but it's been fabulous so far. So pass that on.
Okay, good. Well, I wish I had recorded when you were talking about it before. I've wanted to refer back to that many, many times. It's really good stuff what you've got.
We will do one on language. I promise.
Okay.
I have people in and out. Can you tell?
Yes.
Owner operators. Good people. Okay, we better get serious. There he is. See him in purple.
Good morning, Susan. Good morning, Lee. Good
Morning,
Lynn.
cutie. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
I tried to meditate this morning and it was completely, well, no, not completely useless, but it took me quite a while to come down to earth.
I get it.
Tony, I've just made you a co-host. Good morning, welcome.
Thank you.
And
Good morning.
so without further ado.
Yeah, he's right there.